Hi guys, my name's Andy and I have with me Tim Burr. Tim is a site leader at Ivy Church Academy, one of several part of the Ivy Church leadership team here. And so really thank you for being on. And Tim, I want to kind of get straight into asking you questions so you can speak. Is that okay?
That's great.
So Tim, briefly, can you tell me about how long you've been in this role and what you were doing before you entered this role that you're in now?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a site leader at Ivy since 2000, about summer 2016, so nearly 4 years now. Before that, I was doing the leadership residency program at Ivy for a year. So that's the year time that we have to learn what it means to be a site leader, to study theology, to put loads of stuff into practice, to learn, make a whole bunch of mistakes, but really be formed in that time, and as a time to process as well and discern what God's calling us into after. So I did that for a year, and then the 4 years of being a site leader I did with Ollie, and who's one of the other site leader at Academy. And now, before that, I was working in London. I grew up in Manchester, but moved down to London to study, did a physics degree down there. And when I graduated, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I basically just took the first job that I got offered, working in sales for a global IT services company. So I was doing that for 5 years, working in the private sector and public sector.
Great. That's a big shift, isn't it? To corporate job in London, sales, I'm imagining like, and I might be exaggerating here, the fancy suits, the kind of like the high life or corporate high life, to doing what you're doing now. What happened? What changed that ambition?
I think it was a matter of the ambition being redirected. I was 4 years into I was actually 3 years into my sales career when my ex-girlfriend and I broke up. And we'd been together for 7 years, and it was quite a big deal. And because of that, I started coming back to Manchester a bit more to see my parents. And my parents are Christians and always have been. And they were always on at me, where are you at with your faith? Are you going to church? And I was just like, it used to make me so angry, because I was just like, Mum, I've got a first-class master's degree. I've got a great job. I'm living in central London. I'm 25. I've got a BMW. I was like, I'm living the dream. Like, I've got everything you've ever wanted for me. Surely, why can't you just be proud of me? My mum always used to say, but Tim, the most important thing is a relationship with God. It's to know Jesus. He used to really get under my skin, wind me up, nobody's business. But anyway, so that year, I started coming back to Manchester, visiting my parents, and I basically just go to church on a Sunday to make my parents happy, to avoid awkward conversation on Sunday lunch or on the drive to the train station at Stockport to get the train back to London, which happened every time. But then basically after a year of that, so like summer 2014, I went along to a service at Ivy Church. And I basically just said, okay, God, if you're real, you need to make yourself real to me, because I don't know how to find you, even if I wanted to. And in that moment, I was filled with an experience of the love of God and his acceptance and presence and power that I'd never experienced anything like that. And it really kind of, it was just during a worship service, and I just had to sit down, and I was overwhelmed, and I cried I cried and cried. I just never experienced like that. And there was so much going on in my life that anyway, it was a very intense experience. And I think it really humbled me, because I had this moment where I realized that God is alive, that he is like the creator of the whole universe, and he's much more powerful than I am. And I suddenly felt very, very small after a long time of being the king of my own world and the center of my own universe. But at the same time, it was an experience of God's love. And so I think what happened then was that I was saying about you're saying about ambition and career was that the energy and passion that I'd been so investing into my sales career, and I was doing well. Like, I joined with the six of us on the grad scheme. Me and one other guy had got well ahead of the others. And I gave my life and soul to that job, man. I was traveling, it was like Monday morning till Friday night. They owned me, wherever, and even on the weekends. And I think what started to happen, and obviously there's a lot of success and great things that comes with that, but there's also a lot of insecurity, identity, and just like you ride the highs and lows of it. And I think, and that was causing anxiety and probably, what we'd probably say today as being, mental health problems, suicidal thoughts and different things like that. So it was really high and lots of lows. But then what happened was, after this experience of Jesus and encounter with God, then my ambition changed, and it started to shift away from being about what I could achieve for myself. Although obviously that's still there in different ways, but actually an ambition and a desire for God. And so in the course of then the following year, I was having conversations with Anthony Delaney, who leads the Ivy Church Network. And he said, who's saying that, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? You can make loads of money, you can work in sales, but is that really what you want? And, if you come to Manchester, and this is a conversation a month after this experience of God. So it was quite new. And he's like, well, why don't you come to Manchester? We're going to set up this program to train church planters. Well, what do you think? And I just gripped by it. I didn't understand it, but I was gripped by it. And I knew that it was what I had to do. And I had a long sort of flip-flop journey for about 9 months after that. But eventually I just knew God had spoken to me really clearly and confirmed it in lots of different ways over that year, which brought me to a place where I was like, I now can't not do this, rather than this is something I could do. So that was in summer 2015. I left my job in London and moved back to Manchester at 26 or whatever, however old I was, and moved back in with mum and dad, and joined the team at Ivy.
Wow. What a pivot, right? What a radical transformation that was, Tim. And I'm interested. So that shift, a redirection of your ambition, if you like, from that old life to your current one. What, if anything, do you miss from that old life?
That's a great question, Andy. What do I miss? I think there are some aspects of the different thoughts. I think there are some aspects of the job that I miss. I think I get to do, being at Ivy, I actually get to do the things that I enjoyed about my old job. So the things that I loved about my job, I loved that, especially like in account management and new business sales, I loved that I could start something with a client and do something with them that our company had never done before. That was actually the thing that really motivated me. Especially in account management, there's a certain, like, we called it like churn. It's where there's like project work that's coming in that keeps the systems going and the services going. Now, that was fine. It was a bit boring to me, to be honest. The things that I liked was, okay, we'd never done any work in IT security, or we'd never done this before. And to be able to do that and build a more strategic relationship with a client, I really loved. Like, that was what really got me going. And I was really good at that. And I really enjoyed the relational aspects of it. So I guess like that really is probably comes from like the way I'm wired. Like, I like new things, starting new things, having a go at things, trying things that haven't been done before. And I do get a lot of freedom at Ivy to do that, to have a go at pioneering and reaching out and trying things, which is good. So I guess sometimes those are aspects of my old job that I really loved. That's what was great. The thing I didn't like was like the sales target, the micromanagement, the weekly pipeline calls. I don't miss that at all. I honestly, I miss people in London. I had a really good friends down there, and I still stay in contact with them. And actually, some of my old colleagues still follow me, watch things that I put out, or message me. some of the like, old directors and stuff, which I think is it's always hilarious to me when they do, because I wonder what they think of me, but that's another conversation. And I think I have really good friends at my church down in London. And again, like I still stay in touch with them, but it's not like the same, you know. Yeah, I think you know, honestly, sometimes you, in some senses, it was a lot easier. And the reason I say that is that I feel like there's more at stake now. It matters to me so much more what I do now. It's I don't want to say it's everything, because it's not like it's not like I'm tied to it in a sense, in an unhealthy, well, maybe it does get unhealthy sometimes, but it, you know, if we won or lost a sales deal, like as long as I had my job still afterwards, like it doesn't really matter. It didn't matter to me. I was never really about the money. It was probably more about being seen to be doing well or having affirmation from my boss, you know, being really honest, than it was about, and building a relationship with a client. It was more like the relational things that motivated me and the opportunities rather than the money. But I think now the thing that's changed, and the thing that makes it harder sometimes, like a lot harder, is that this matters. For me, this really matters. It is the life and death thing. It seeing people come to know Jesus and learn how to follow him is, for me, it's like the most important thing. So it's like, you feel it, you know, when people aren't interested, it can be really painful sometimes. Just like, oh, but you can't see how amazing God is, or who Jesus is, or understand what they've done. You're just like, oh man, it breaks my heart. So you know, it's not, you can't take these things personally. I used to take it really personally, because it's so important to me. So when people are like, "No, I'm not interested," it would just be like, "Oh, sort of sword through the chest." So I've learned a lot anyway. But I think the thing so sometimes when things get really hard, I look back to that, and I'm not saying my job in sales wasn't hard. It was hard. Like, it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think, oh, I could just go back. It would just be easier to go back. It wouldn't cost me as much. Yeah, I'd still have to work long hours and, you know, put a shift in. I'm always going to do the best I can. But you know, I don't know if that makes sense really, but I think
it does. I mean, yeah, from what you're saying, the stakes are a lot higher doing what you're doing now in the role that you have now compared to when you were working in London, right? That may be ultimately for profit, you know, for financial gain for the company, and you'd get certain perks and rewards for that. But here, the priority is completely shifted, right? Your perks and your reward is not a material gain. You know, it's not maybe even a sense of pride or accomplishment. It's to see somebody else start a relationship with God.
Yeah.
It's completely shifted. Something you mentioned, and I'm curious about this, Tim. You talked about the riding the highs and the lows of the corporate job. You know, you're fully in, and it owned you. Yeah. And now being in this role for the last few years, with higher stakes, I would imagine there's still highs and lows to ride. Yeah. How do you ride them differently to before then? You know, how do you still manage that type of thing?
Yeah, it's funny because when I left my job in London, I thought that and moved to Ivy, I thought, oh, all the problems I used to have in my old job, I won't have anymore because I'm in a different context doing something different. But that was complete nonsense, because of course, all of my insecurities, unhealthy habits and everything else came right along with me. But I have learned a lot. I think things that I've been learning are, one, that I'm not in control. And as you said, this is about, you know, when we're talking about helping people find their way back to God, which is our vision at Ivy Church, like, I'm not in control of that. I'm not in control of someone else's journey. And so I can't actually make anything happen. What I can do is be faithful to pray for people, to share the gospel with people, and be there and love them. And that's my service. Like, I can't, and as soon as I try to make something happen, I'm unstuck. And when I first moved back to Manchester and I started talking to my friends about Jesus, they just got so annoyed, because I think it was a raw passion that needed some maturing, shall we say. And there's probably still a lot of that. So I think it's that thing of, like, I'm not actually in control. I can only do what God has asked me to do, which is to be faithful and loving, praying and sharing with people. But ultimately, people are responsible for their own behavior and decisions. And I can be there and influence, but I'm certainly not in control. And so it's like, in that sense, the pressures are off, because it is on me, but it's not. I do my bit. The results are up to God, between God and the other person. Or, you know, and you can apply that much more broadly. I think the other thing is that it's very much relationship. There's lots of tasks, but this is all about relationships. And I guess a bit like sales, I used to say sales is all about relationships, and ministry and working as a follower of Jesus. I'm hesitant to say ministry, but I suppose it is ministry. Is all about relationships, and sometimes those relationships are great, and sometimes they're not. And I think one thing that a big learning lesson for me to help kind of go through the highs and lows is to not take things personally. And sometimes it feels really personal when things don't happen the way you were hoping or had, you know, been dreaming about. That actually it can feel very personal, but it's just not to take it personally. And I felt like that's really helpful. That's been a helpful learning point for me.
And that's really interesting. Don't take it personally, but sometimes it's difficult too. How do you deal with, like, catching yourself in that moment? It's almost like not being able to see yourself when you're inside the frame a little bit. I don't know. Is it? I don't know what your experience of that is. Well,
again, like, I definitely haven't got that down, but I do think there are things you can have in place that help. I'd probably say three things immediately come to mind. One is Becky, my wife, knows me very well, and the Lord has sent her to humble me and to hold up the mirror. And she's really good at that. And she does it in a very loving way, but she really helps me to see things from a different perspective and very gently just consider how it might be more about my reaction to a circumstance than something that's actually going on. I think the second thing I would say is having spaces where you reflect and think about the way you're feeling, the way that you've been doing things, your actions, your emotions, is really helpful. And this is something I've really invested in a lot in the last year, is taking time to think actually trying to build it in now as a daily rhythm at the end of the day, to reflect on the day, replay it, think about what happened, what made me happy, what made me sad, what made me angry, what made me excited, was really helpful. And then, because what happens is you start to see patterns of things. And kind of alongside that, reflecting on, like, what was it like growing up in my family, what the dynamics between, say, me and my mother or father, my brothers and sisters, what about their relationships with mum and dad, what about extended family, and to just reflect on that, you start to see patterns emerge with how you feel about things day to day, which is so fascinating and slightly exposing. And I think, so those kinds of exercises where you're deliberately reflecting on how you're feeling and why, and why you react in certain ways or why you do things in certain ways. Even thinking about other key relationships that you've had, maybe with bosses or whoever, is helpful because like I said, you start to see patterns, which means that you can recognize behaviors and where it's really coming from rather than just justifying yourself.
Yeah.
And I think so that's like having a Becky reflecting, journaling, those disciplines are so important. It's like, is it Socrates that said, an unexamined life is not worth living. I find that helpful. Horribly, maybe misquoted. And then the final thing I'd say is having mentors is so key. And I'm really blessed to have, a few guys, older guys, some, in their 60s, some in their late 30s or 40s, like 4 or 5 of them that I talk to regularly. And I kind of talk about, they have the freedom to ask me penetrating questions, but then I also talk, things that I'm reflecting on and thinking about, I talk through with them, and they're really helpful. They're so good at helping me to unpack what I'm thinking or feeling, but also to see situations differently. And even a simple question as, what's been a challenge since we last spoke? And I'll start talking about it, and I might not even realize that how I'm feeling about it, but they'll pick up on it and be like, oh, that's interesting you've said it like that. I wonder what's going on there. And sometimes they help me to see that what I've been feeling or thinking is right and I need to act upon it. And other times they've helped me to see that actually this is more about what's going on in me. So having those kinds of people, and also female mentors as well, just to help with different perspective. And I've got one in particular who I've known. She's known me since I was 2, so she knows me pretty well, and she's brilliant and she's great for me and Becky. So I think it's that, like Becky, mentors and journaling are like really key, and friends obviously play a part in that too.
That's awesome, Tim. That's really good to set up that rhythm and to create that type of environment for yourself. To even instigate that and do that shows an awareness of the areas that you feel like could really help push you forward. And yeah, it's awesome that taking that initiative. Great. Just switching gears here, Tim. We're obviously in a we're in a crisis. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I'm interested, when this really got serious, and it wasn't maybe a set date, or maybe we could say, or when the government announced lockdown, or maybe it's in and around that time, what were some of the primary thoughts that came to mind for you in your position?
That's a great question. I think immediately it kind of went into crisis mode. So it's like, is everyone okay? What are we going to do about X, Y, Z? It just went into into overdrive, like crisis response overdrive. And that lasted for probably about 2 or 3 weeks, I reckon. And it was like super long days. I remember there was so much going on. I was like missing things. Like I'd join a call like 2 minutes late and I'd already missed some key thing that was going on. So it was just really chaotic. So I wasn't really thinking much about myself, to be honest, or probably Becky that much, but we probably both had that tendency to try and sort out other things first before thinking about ourselves. And that's not particularly selfless characteristic. It's just more I don't know, the way that we are. So I think the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was very much like call everybody. It was just like the to-do list just exploded and multiplied and proliferated all across my wall and desktop. So it was just very chaotic. Yeah.
And now we're a good few weeks in now. I'm hoping that has settled somewhat into a bit more of a steady, manageable pace for you. Yeah, you're nodding. Okay.
Well, it's funny because I think we're always looking for things to be normal. So whatever we can say is normal, we go, all right, this is normal now. But that changes every week. So it's a bit of a nonsense, really. But it gives us some illusion of comfort, doesn't it? So for me to even begin to say to you, oh, it's kind of settled down and feels a bit normal, it's probably just a coping mechanism more than anything else. In some senses, things have settled. Like we've been working from home now for 4 weeks. We've been doing online church and grow group and family Zoom calls on a Sunday afternoon. So in terms of like the rhythm of things, I feel like there is a sense of, okay, this is what this looks like. I think I'm very aware that there was like the initial like, is everyone okay? And largely for us, people were. And needed a little bit of support here and there, but it was generally okay. I think the thing that's on my mind is that as the weeks go on, more and more people will be directly affected. So by the virus itself. So by which I mean sickness in themselves or in their family, which may lead to death. And so I'm conscious that pastorally things will potentially become more demanding, and there'll be a greater need for it. And there'll be more people that are hurting and need support. So I'm aware of that. I think more personally, I think I've felt in the first 2 weeks, I felt really stressed, like really anxious and really stressed. And like I was just drowning in the amount of things that needed to be done. And we, as a church, we have done a whole series as part of our year of focus on how we ruthlessly eliminate hurry. And I feel like it's so funny at the beginning of this time, everyone's like, oh, this is so great because now we have to slow down. And I was like, after a week of it, I was like, no, we have the opportunity to put into practice the things that we've learned or not. And actually we can sit at home, but still we might physically be forced to stay in one place, but like we can still be just as hurried, cramming in Zoom calls, like watching Netflix or whatever, and being busy. And all of that stuff that we've been journeying and talking about can go straight out of the window. And I was feeling that. I was really feeling that after 2 weeks. I was like, I'm feeling the most unhealthy emotionally and spiritually like that I've felt in ages. I was like, this has got to stop. And so it's things like, right, bedtimes are going in. Like we have to be strong about bedtimes, not watching things late at night, getting up at the same time, having the discipline about prayer time, pausing. I've been doing this thing where I stop in the middle of the day just for 5 minutes and pray through the Lord's Prayer, just to recenter and to still myself. If I feel restless or anxious, just taking a moment to breathe, taking time to pray in the evening. It's like I've had to re-put those things in this new sort of context. And that has like really, really helped. I think for me personally, like we've had a few scares in our family, but nothing that has, like in my side of the family, nothing massively concerning. That's not the whole story, but it's for another time. But I think oh gosh, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. I totally forgot what I was going to say.
That's all right. But I love what you're saying about. It's really interesting is we can learn the knowledge, we can read the books, and we might think we have a handle on it until we're really put into an environment where, okay, now's the time for implementation. Now's the time to test whether that knowledge I have, whether I can apply it, whether I've fully internalized it.
Well, that's it. Because I realized that basically, if the change hasn't happened on the inside, it doesn't matter what change happens outside. You're still the same person. You're just in a different situation. So I was like, actually, you have to fight for some of these things and put them in. I remember what I was going to say. And this has been a real learning point for me. I think it's really interesting how I've observed that being away from people, especially in a work context, really exacerbates our insecurities. And the reason I say that is, especially like noticing it in like how trust works in a team or how team dynamics work, when you're not there with each other physically and having like the corridor conversations where you're joking around and like having fun, where you like, oh, we're friends and we're really for each other. If when you don't have that and you've only got the challenging things that you're wrestling through as a team, there is like you can see how suspicion or comparison creeps in. It's really weird. And actually like just being aware of like, oh, how I'm responding to things, being like, wait a minute, Tim, like having to check myself and go, why are you thinking like this? Or why are you responding like this? Come on. And like, oh gosh, yeah. So I've just noticed that. That's been interesting.
That is really cool. That's really cool to notice that. Because you, I don't know, it's like you almost have to switch perspective first to even be able to have that viewpoint, then to see what you see from that viewpoint. It's like there's two steps to that. You're never going to see it from a different way if you don't even realize there's another way to see it from, if that makes sense. Going back to COVID-19, you mentioned it was really tough for you at the beginning, all hands on deck, you and Becky both focusing on what's going on around you, making sure everybody's okay, making sure things are going to still work. And now we're a good few weeks into this. What's your take? What's your understanding of how God is working during this time? Maybe in your life personally and beyond.
Couple of things. I think firstly, it has been a real call to deepen this sense of intimacy and closeness to God. I think partly, I think it's with the thing of it being that there are so many things I could be doing that if I try and do all of it, I'll work long hours and always feel anxious that I've never done enough. And I think that the things that have been on my mind personally have been like Jesus said, for example, he said, I only ever do what I see the Father doing. And I guess kind of picking up on some of the things we talked about of ruthless elimination of hurry, it's slowing down and thinking, okay, there's obviously all these things I could do. There's hundreds of things I could do for my immediate community and in terms of reaching to people outside. I can't do it all. So it's slowing down the pace so that I'm going, okay, Jesus, what are the 3 things I need to do today? I must do, and that you're going to help me with and give me the grace for. And what are the other things that are nice to do's or I can do, but don't matter so much. Yeah. So I think there's been that whole area of slowing down, walking in step with the Holy Spirit, listening to Jesus, being guided by his promptings of when to call people or what work to do, or what matters as, different priorities come in from different places that, all need to happen yesterday. So I think that's been a really fundamental, like longing or desire, I think, has just been like, I need to be so rooted in Jesus, so rooted in the Father's love that my sense of worth or value is not dictated by my ability to put out all these fires or to solve all these problems. Because it's like, that is it's a demanding boss that is never satisfied, and God is not our boss. He's a father. So I think it's like the identity thing of like knowing that I'm loved and that I'm accepted and I've got nothing to prove at the start of every day. But I've got nothing to prove, but I do have the opportunity to love and to support and to serve and to help because I'm loved. I'm not trying to be better than any of my colleagues. I'm not trying to save the world because we can't. And that's Jesus's job, not mine. So I think there's like that first thing of slowing down, still enjoying things. Like, that might sound odd, but sitting outside at lunchtime with Becky and having a nice lunch, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying time together, and it not just being like always thinking about who needs help and support, but looking after ourselves. So I think that's one thing really. And then the other thing I'd say is, for me and Becky, it's been a really helpful time to, even at the same time as we're like sorting out the needs of today, it's been really helpful to have it as an opportunity to think about the future and where we're going, and to seek God for that too, for vision for our marriage or friendships or ministry, work, church, and to take a step back and go, okay, if this continues as it is, I'm not saying that in a negative sense, but where is this going? And in terms of some of the things that God has spoken to us about in the last year about the future, and kind of not necessarily like plans for the future, but certainly like an orientational focus, like what does that look like to bring things into alignment, to get above the trees and the day to day and think, okay, where are we going? What's the bigger picture? And to make, I guess, decisions, but also to think about what do we need to do, prepare, think through, plan, articulate, write down, pray through, talk to people about, that will mean that we're not just, this time doesn't just go and it's just been busy, but that actually it's been really fruitful in the bigger sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's like, having that dual, one eye on the present and the other eye on, well, what's beyond this, that. So I mean, that already, like, it presupposes that you're already looking ahead, that there's, my words, hope, light, an end to this. Right? So that's like a sense of encouragement, because sometimes we can get swallowed up so much in the present that we can't see the end to this. And there are even some people who maybe have the attitude of, well, we can only look at today. But there is a balance, right? There is a blend to have, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great.
I think that's the way Jesus talks about it. Well, the Bible talks about it in two different ways. You read Proverbs and it's like it says something like the plans of the diligent lead to profit. And the Proverbs talks a huge amount about making plans. But at the same time, Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. And in the book of James, he says, don't boast about tomorrow. So it's this balance of like, we need to be diligent as leaders and disciples and human beings to make plans that lead to profit, but not worry about them. Neither boast, I'm going to be a billionaire this time next year, or I'm going to have the most successful X, Y, and Z, because you don't know. You have no idea. And how many investments are made in new businesses who boast about tomorrow because of their great business plan that comes to nothing? We can't. So I think there is that balance of, we don't need to be anxious, but I do think there's a sense, like Jesus would say, don't be anxious about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. So it's a sense of like, I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to be fearful of the future, but there is a sense of actually seeing and listening to God about where is he leading us? How then do we make decisions in line with that, about, that would inform our plans for the future. And I don't know, I find that as like a helpful balance.
That's great. I love it. So Tim, on that note, I think we'll finish there. Thanks so much for your sharing. Really insightful to find out how God has been working in your life, even preparing you during your time in London, all the way up to now. It's like for such a time as this. Thanks for being a leader in Ivy. Thanks for serving. And just thank you for your time this morning, Tim.
Oh, mate, it's been a privilege. Thank you.
See you later.
See you, mate.